Yo, 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 what's up, everybody? This is your boy Isaac.
And this is your boy Bryce.
And we are brothers on tennis. And guess what, folks? We've got a special guest today. Man, I'm telling you, this gentleman has done a lot of things in the tennis world, and we are extremely excited to have a conversation with him. And definitely during this time where hopefully folks are clamoring for some content, let me tell you, this will be the one that you want to listen to. Bryce, what's up, man? Let's talk about our guest here, man. What you got for me?
Well, I am very excited to introduce to our audience Mr. Craig Shapiro. Now, before I bring him on and let him loose on the mic, I just want to give you guys just a little bit of his background, right? So Craig is the founder and the host of Under Review Tennis Podcast. So it is a podcast that focuses on doing what he calls evergreen podcast, so we'll hopefully have him talk about that a little bit today. But probably what will be very interesting to you is that for a couple of years in the late 90s, Craig was a racket technician for Andre Agassi. So he traveled the world with Agassi, taking care of his rackets. I definitely want to hear a little bit more about that. You listeners know that Isaac and I are already big Agassi fans, so this is going to be really, really good. But Craig has done so much more than that. Craig has worked with HBO Sports. He's worked with the USA Network when they had the US Open. He's worked with the Tennis Channel. I think he's responsible for doing both of the documentaries on Andre Agassi and Pete Sampras. So if there is a person that embodies being really involved in the sport without having to be the player on the court, I think Craig fits that role really well. So with all that being said, Craig, say hi. Welcome.
Yo, what's happening, fellas? Thank you for, letting me get on the microphone with you guys.
Oh, man, it's our pleasure, my man. So good to talk to you today. Man, first of all, Craig, just, we are so interested in you. We've come to really enjoy your podcast series. I mean, just listening to all of the people that you've interacted with has just been simply incredible. So I just, I wanted to ask you just a little bit about your initial background of how you got to this point, as far as, some of the things that you went through going, through the tennis, structure. To get to this point in your career where you've got an extremely successful podcast?
Well, we hope, we're moving in that direction. It seems like the show is very good, and, getting the word out is tougher than doing the show, at least from my perspective. I feel like we could get the interviews. We could do good, compelling interviews, and getting the word out is the challenge. But I'm grateful. We're into our 65th episode. We just dropped it today. Greg Ruzetsky, former world number 4, former Canadian, now Englishman. He's a broadcaster. But to answer your question, my father loved tennis. My dad, we grew up in Rhode Island. My father is from Connecticut. My mother is from Queens. And my dad just, he just knew that, I actually have a picture of Arthur Ashe in my room that I got signed in Newport, Rhode Island when I was, a little kid. My dad loved Arthur Ashe. My dad loved Bjorn Borg. He just knew that tennis was going to become the hottest thing, and he ran a trip to the US Open every Labor Day weekend for almost my whole life. So I told you guys when we first talked, I'm 48. I think I might have been to 38, 39, 40 US Opens.
Wow.
I didn't miss very many. No. And I was just a okay player. I played 3 on my high school team. I probably could have done better, but I probably lose more matches than I win. But I got clean strokes, and we just love tennis. So when I finished college, I got a job teaching tennis at the New York Health and Racket Club at the corner of Wall Street and South Street. I tried to work on Wall Street. I went to work for some stockbroker joint, and I hated it. And one day I answered an ad came across the fax machine at the tennis club from a company that was called Jay's Custom Stringing, and I knew about these guys. They were the premier racket stringers and technicians there was, and I came to learn that I basically like buzzed up to them and had an interview, and I got the job. Like, I was the first person that answered the ad, and I got the job. And they must have been blown away that I knew who they were. And at that time, this guy Jay Schweid was he was a guy from Queens. He loved tennis, and he was kind of quirky and like a tech guy. You know what I mean? Like, he was like, he kind of had like a techie sort of vibe to him, and he basically, put the tennis rackets on a scale and learned that no two rackets were the same. And he learned that players that play with a Prince racket, if they got a deal with Wilson, well, guess what? The dimensions of the handle are different, right? So the dimensions of a handle of a head racket to a Prince racket to a Wilson, they're all different. To a vocal, whatever it may be. And he basically conceptualized a stringing pattern that he claimed was better than other stringing patterns, where you tied off the strings on the sides. But I got the job. Basically, he and at that time, it was probably like 1997. I guess earlier on, Andre had a problem with his rackets, and Jay came to the rescue, and he got a deal done with Andre where someone from Jay's Custom Stringing would travel with Andre wherever he went. Wow. And after about 6 months of like learning how to do the work, they put me in, and I spent like maybe, I have to look at it, but I think it could have been 20 months. I didn't do it I don't think I even did it for 2 full years, but I spent listen, we went to Australia. We went to Monte Carlo, Munich, DC, LA, Indianapolis, Miami, Stuttgart, Hanover. So yeah, man, like I know, so I did that. And along with that, these guys would set up on site at the big tournaments and string all their clients' rackets. So we would be in Key Biscayne during the Miami tournament, like hunkered down in a house we rented and just stringing rackets from the morning to the night until, players started losing and when they would buzz out of there. And then, things would loosen up. But yeah, I kept those relationships together. And I think in August of 1998, I quit. I quit in Cincinnati. And maybe at the end of September, October, I got a job at HBO Sports.
So, Craig, let me interrupt you for a second. So, sure. I have a question before we transition out of the racket technician phase.
Yeah, for sure.
So, I guess I kind of get what your day is like when you're at a tournament. So, since you were on the road with Andre for 20 months, what was a typical day like? If it was just, if he was just practicing, were you not needed?
String the rackets day of in the morning. So like if Andre, he would tell you sometimes, he'd say, all right, just give me one at 64, give me one at 62, give me one at 58. No, I don't ever want to go that loose. Because quite often you get to the tournament and he was trying to dial in his tension. So he might not need a bunch of rackets, but he would need like one or two. And then on match day, it was one per set. So you give him 3. And then in the slams, you give him 5. I think that's what it was. I can't totally remember, but someone will hear this and they'll check me. Some of these colleagues will check me, but I think it was 1 per set. But yeah, other than that, it was pretty loosey-goosey. The problem was the boss, was back in New York, like, wrecking everyone's life. So, he made it less romantic, I guess you might say. But I did amazing stuff. You can't. You're 20. I think I was 23, 24. I had zero chance of being any kind of a pro anything. It seemed like I didn't know there was such a thing as like TV producers and stuff. I didn't have any kind of feel for that. So to have been able to pop up, I went to Wimbledon, I went to the French Open, I was taking player transportation. I have credentials that say Coach Agassi, and one of those years I'd gotten myself in really, really good shape. And that's the other thing, you're around these athletes all the time. You're just working out all the time. And in Monte Carlo, the credentials people gave me a player badge. So I got a Jouer badge. They thought I was a player, so I thought that was it's kind of, I don't know how corny I sound right now, but that sort of brings like a smile to your face though when you see your buddies at the players lounge and they're like, well, they gave you a player badge, man. I was like, yeah. I was like, play on, player.
because you know what? I would tell I would just tell you from my perspective, if you told me you were a racket technician that traveled a couple of years with Andre Agassi, to me, that sounds very glamorous.
Right.
I was making like $500 a week.
And I take it you had no expenses.
I don't remember, man, but I remember thinking like, how can I finesse a cooler thing? I was, yeah, for sure. But listen, the guys that do that work, they still do it, man. And I liken them to the blacksmiths that made the swords for the gladiators.
Right.
I do. I really do. I feel like there are these craftsmen that are doing very important work. And to be honest, I think they should get paid a lot more. Then the players should pay them a lot because, they're in charge of the weapon.
Absolutely.
But it wasn't for me. I hated, like, I wanted to be out into, one of the things that was like just tore me up was when we were at, like, say, the French Open, all the players would come in all dressed up, ready to go out to dinner, and they would drop off the rackets. So I'd be in Paris on a Saturday night stringing rackets till the break of dawn, and I was like, oh, man, no shot. I'm zero on this, man. Like, really, I just was not gonna do that for long. But I hung with it, and I was able to. I knew all the agents, because that's how it works. Is what happens is the players get to a certain level. And when the player gets to a certain level, they get a certain, the agent, generally speaking, puts them on the program. So it's like, okay, these guys do your rackets. This is where you go to train. This is where you go to train in Europe. This is where you go for knee surgery, whatever it is. It's like you get taught a way. A player gets taught a way, and I was able to kind of learn some of those machinations, as they say. So I knew all the agents. I knew a lot of the players. I knew a lot of the coaches. And I kept those relationships somewhat together. And you know how, for the most part, you know how guys are, I guess. Maybe like you might not see someone for 20 years, but they still remember you like it was yesterday. So it's like, I run into Tim Henman. I run into Alex. When I started the podcast, I'd see these guys from time to time. And even before the podcast, I'd see these guys and, you know, say hello. You say, hey, you remember me? And say, oh, yeah, of course, man. Da, 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 da. And that's kind of how it's been.
And that's a huge advantage for you creating a podcast, because you already are connected to the key sources. And see, like a podcast like we are, you know, we're just now kind of developing a lot of those relationships very organically. Right. So we think, you know, that's a huge advantage, you know, you had.
Listen, man, and you know, the other thing is I went from there into television, right? So I've been fortunate. I as you mentioned in the open, I worked in tennis in television periodically. You know, I'd worked for the USA Network and for CBS in the live broadcast of the US Open. I got hired to, do stories for USA Network in advance of the US Open. When the Tennis Channel came on the scene around 2006, I actually was commissioned to do documentaries on Andre and Pete. And, you know, they got control of the French Open in 2007. I went to the French Open then. And, you know, I wasn't really able to find a good lane in television, in tennis television. I hated being in the live TV truck. I really didn't have a good lane, and I wasn't able to really just kind of, you know, make the money I wanted to make, and I wasn't able to just fold in and be myself the way I wanted to. So I backed way out of it. And from time to time, something would pop up, thinking like 2016 or 17. I think maybe 2017, I did a story on Coco Vandeweghe for the Tennis Channel. She actually was 8 in the world, and she was going into the Australian Open. Maybe it was 2018. I'm not sure. You have to check it. But I would get like a little. I always say I've been like seduced and abandoned by the Tennis Channel.
Okay.
Like I would get something, and they'd be like, "Oh, yo, we gotta do 100 of these," and then, you know, it just would never pop. It would never come back. So anyway, my friend Scott Tuft is a tennis fan, and he in August 2000, you know, probably like June, July 2018, he said, you know, we should do a tennis podcast and you should host it. And I said, yeah, but I'm kind of a behind the camera guy. I don't do that. And it's a long story, but I basically am a contributor to a very cool magazine called Racket Magazine, which is like it's a piece of artwork. I describe it as the coolest thing in tennis. And I'm a contributor and a friend. And I wrote a story for them for their 6th edition, but I took a long time to write it, and that really, and I was really proud of that. You know, it was great. Like I pitched it. The editor, his name is Dave Shaftel. He's a real deal journalist. He bought it, right? I got paid. I went to Italy and to Paris to do the interview for my stories. And it's like, 3,500 word story about a gentleman named Martin Mulligan who was 3 in the world in 1967. He was the only player to have match point on Rod Laver. The year Rod Laver won the Grand Slam, he had match point on him in the quarterfinals of the French Open. He lost to Laver at Wimbledon. But the thing that's wild is, there's two things that's wild. The first is he was Australian, but he was getting screwed by the Davis Cup captain, Harry Hopman, the famous Harry Hopman, wouldn't put him on the team. So Italian, the greatest player in Italy, Nicola Pietrangeli, said, listen, Martin, just move to Italy. You could play for us. And he did it. And he became an Italian hero. He won the Italian Open 3 times. They called him Martino Mulligano.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a banana story. But the other, and then at the end of his career, he put Borg and Vilas in Diodora's shoes. He was like a consultant for Diodora, and this Italian underwear company from a place called Biella had come up with this shirt that had no seam, and they wanted to get into tennis, and they were Fila, and from the first day till today, he is the only head of the pro player program for Fila. His name is Martin Mulligan. I think he's 84 years old. I just saw him in Indian Wells.
Wow.
And
That's
it's just a bad to the bone story, but like it got me so happy. and then I pitched another story, and I had some interviews to do for the other story. So I said to my friend, I said, all right, man, let's record these interviews and see if there's something there. And I interviewed Jeff Tarango first, and it was great. And then I called Brad Gilbert, and we rocked the mic. And I rolled out the Brad Gilbert episode first. And it was, I don't want to call it a smash hit because it's not a smash hit, but it was very well received. And from then on, it was like being on like what do they call it? Like the wheel, the mouse goes around, like the you just can't stop. You just got to keep rocking episodes. So since then we went Brad Gilbert, Jeff Tarango, Nicholas Pereira, who is a broadcaster on Tennis Channel now, but he was a great player. His episode, I love his episode. And then, the Serena Osaka incident happened. I put a woman who's a close friend, her and her husband, Ashley Harkleroad, on, and the reason I put Ashley on was because, first of all, she'd played Venus and Serena. She kind of came up with them, and and Ashley's agent was Jill Smoller, who's Serena's agent. And I was trying to kind of, make a timely episode. But generally, and then we did Ashley, then we did Tommy Haas, then we did Ashley's husband, Chuck Adams, who was 30 in the world. And then we went to London. We interviewed Tim Henman, Prakash Amatraj, Robbie Koenig. It just went on. We just kept going and going and going and going and going.
So, Craig, I have a question for you. Now, are all of your interviews done in person?
I try to. Obviously, generally speaking, the answer is yes. But we've made exceptions. I'm trying to think. I've made exceptions like 3, 4, 5 times. Now, in light of what's happened, I'm just keeping the show popping, and we're doing remote interviews, like we're doing now. Yeah.
Right.
But generally speaking, my experience is the interview is better in person. And generally speaking, my experience is the listener likes it when I say, okay, man, we're sitting in the basement of the O2 Arena in a closet with former world number one James Spencer Curry, or I'm sitting in the green room or the locker room of the New York Islanders at the Nassau Coliseum with Nick Bollettieri, and Nick's like, yeah, how you doing? Da, da, da. I mean, people like that. But listen, if I got to make the call, we do it over the phone, and that's how it's got to be.
Now, one of the things that we've been looking at with our podcast is going through the whole media accreditation process and, hoping to get into the media rooms and all that. Do you follow a similar process, or do you kind of rely on your contacts that you already have kind of developed over the years?
Man, generally speaking, we've been extremely fortunate to be given media credentials. But the media credential for me is a blessing and a curse, because once you have a media credential on, you got to play by the media. You got to play by the media rules, and for my purposes, I'm not going to. We tried to request player access at the tournaments, and it's not really possible for the length of time that I need for my shows. So I try to be nimble and talk to other broadcasters, former players. Like, I was at the Australian Open the second week. I interviewed Lindsay Davenport and Henri Lecomte. For me, that's money in the bank. And then I was there on the ground, saying hello to people, having some meetings, and trying to, try to put some money in the bank, right? So, the whole thing is that, like, I'm not writing for the New York Times or the for the LA. I'm not writing for. I'm not a journalist in that sense. So I don't need to be in the press conferences taking notes. I just want to be on the grounds, and I want to be able to be nimble. So if I run into Peter Korda, I could say, hey, man, it's great to see you. The last time I saw you, I think I strung your rackets to when you won the Australian Open. I love the way your kid plays. Let's sit down in the grass over here and do a podcast, or give me your number. So it doesn't matter if I have a grounds pass or the media credential is useful because, first of all, you get into the facility for free, and it legitimizes you as a product.
Right.
Yeah. But that's it, man. I that's how I do it.
So Craig, I keyed in on something that you said earlier about your podcast, and you were kind of in the background, and you didn't know if that it would be something that you want to pop off on. And I'm just very curious to that, because having listened to your podcast, I mean, dude, you are bold. I mean, you get out there and you mix it up with them, and I really love the way that you interact with all of the people that you talk with. So it just seems like it is so extremely natural for you. So, I mean, do you find that you have to do something to kind of, bring that out of yourself? Or because, it's curious that you said that, because to me, I would think that it just is natural for you, because you're good like that. Seriously.
No, listen, I mean, it was a revelation that so when I worked in television, I'm a documentary filmmaker, producer, director type, right? So I was conducting interviews all the time. And I thought I was doing really good interviews, and no one ever said to me, like, hey, man, you do really good interviews. You know, because you don't hear the questions when you see my shows, right? You just hear the person talking.
Right.
But I was kind of like, shit, did anyone ever hear him say that before? No. When Floyd Mayweather just said about, you know, this lawsuit or this court case, like, I'm the one who got that. Why? How come nobody's giving me no? So I felt like I was doing really good interviews, and nobody was really acknowledging that. And when we started doing the podcast, it like really, you know, it was like when you go, if you ever go to a massage and they push like it was hitting all my pressure points because people were like, oh snap, you do great interviews.
Yup.
And I was like, 100%, man. So that was kind of like, you know, I kind of got my power. Like I feel good doing the interviews. I will tell you, last May we went to, or last April, May, we went to the Moratoglu Academy. I was hired by the Tennis Channel to do a story about Patrick that I pitched. And I worked a podcast in at the end, and the guys at the Academy were great, you know, because they liked how I interviewed Patrick. I'd read his book. I knew what I was talking about. I didn't just show up, you know, and I think that sometimes people just show up, and so they basically, Patrick sat down and we did about an hour podcast. So I asked the cameraman to roll, like to record it, you know, to shoot it. And for a second I got nervous, like being on the camera, like I froze up a little bit. So it's something I maybe got to work on, you know, but yeah, no, I'm very comfortable off camera, on the microphone, just trying to learn, like, you know, how it is, man. Like, what is it like to have this talent and this skill, and what's it like to lose first round 6 times in a row, and then quarterfinal Australian Open? What's it like to, you know, blow 7 match points to Roger Federer a month ago? You know, all those things. Yeah, you know, all those things fascinate me, and I think that the guests, they like being on my show, and that makes me feel good too. I haven't so far, knock on wood, like I'm waiting for the day where I choke, but I haven't. It's bound to happen where somebody's gonna, you know, it's bound to happen, but I'm trying hard to not let that happen, where I, you know,
right.
where you just want to do good work. Yeah.
Craig, I've heard you mention before that on your podcast, you guys interview the most interesting people in the sport. And so that kind of leads me to a certain question. Of all the people you've interviewed, because you've interviewed players and coaches and people that are behind the scenes, have you ever had a perception about a particular person before you had the interview, and then after having that interview, you had a newfound appreciation for this person?
Well, if you listen to the Wim Fissette interview, that's Naomi's coach.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the Wim Fissette interview, I actually say it to him. I said to him, I was like, you know, I had it in my mind that you were sort of this mysterious, probably not very nice guy. And he was like, well, why do you think that? I was like, well, because you show that you go from player to player, and that speaks to something that I don't quite understand. And the guy went from player to player to hirings to firings to pregnancies to arguments to disagreements he went through every single coaching situation. So he started with Clijsters, then I'm gonna forget, but Azarenka, Hollop, Konta, Kerber, back to Azarenka. Like, it was bananas. And he explained everything. And I was like, and at the end he said, "Hey man, what do you think of me now?" And I said, "Yeah." I said, "Yeah." So, you know, I saw a T-shirt. I saw a T-shirt that Apple Computers had. It said something like, "It's hard to dislike someone once you've learned their story."
That's true.
And I think that, you know, a big thing that I try to do is I try to kind of dig deep and see if we can, learn some things that helps the listener maybe understand the player or the coach or the broadcaster or the tournament director or the executive, the CEO better. Okay. So yeah, but we've had, I've had Ian Hamilton, who basically is the original head of Nike tennis, signed Sampras and Agassi. I had him on the show. I had Steve Flink, the journalist who is in the Hall of Fame. I've had him on. He just has a new book out on Sampras. He's like a real Sampras historian. I've had him on the show. I had Mark Hurd, the head of Oracle, who passed away this past year, on the show because of his involvement in tennis. And then, obviously, the big, the sexiest guests for me are, the former world number ones. Like, I love to say, right, we have former world number ones on the show. I mean, it's just nothing like that. So I've had Wielander, Kafelnikov, Courier, Davenport, in doubles, Mark Woodford. I've had that to me is like magic. I mean, I can't even contain my excitement, to have those world number ones on the show. And then, we had Sophia Kenin on, we had Belinda Bencic on, we had Bianca Andreescu on. So I actually have had on the last two female Grand Slam winners. I mean, wow. Come on, baby. That's unbelievable. Right? You can't make that up.
That's excellent.
Oh, yeah. I mean, like I said, Craig, your reach and your network is it's really incredible. And to be able to boast that is just, yeah, you should be proud of that. You should absolutely be proud of that, man. I mean, that, like I said, yeah, go ahead.
By the way, a lot of wins and losses, man. A lot of wins and losses. And somehow the losses hurt more than the wins sometimes,
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Craig, tell us this. Now, I know that I think you had mentioned to us that you were actually on or at Indian Wells this past few weeks ago, right? Were you there when all of the news kind of broke?
100%.
Yeah. So talk to us about that. I mean, when that whole thing got canceled, what was sort of the sentiment of the folks in your network that you were around, and just the overall thought process there?
Well, I got on the ground. I got down there on Friday because, as you guys know, the week before there's a lot of action. So I got down there the Friday before the tournament was supposed to start on Tuesday, really. But the Oracle Challenger was going on.
Right.
And all the players were already starting to crunch down on Indian Wells. So I was already there. I think there was already, journalists were inquiring of the tournament, like what's the situation, and the tournament was said, well, on Saturday, so Saturday, they announced that the ball kids were going to wear gloves and the players were they weren't going to touch the towels and they were going to refund tickets. Tell you what, man, by Sunday night, it was a wrap.
Wow.
And people thought that it was, myself included, felt like an overreaction. Couldn't have been more wrong about it. Monday, Racket Magazine, the magazine I mentioned, they actually had rented Dinah Shore's house, and they were doing different things, different business and such. So I popped my head over there. I had a medium conversation with Eva Maioli, who sits on the WTA board. She didn't have a feel for what was going on. Donna Vekic mentioned that she hadn't heard what was happening. So, man, I'm telling you, I described it as it was like the tennis Twilight Zone. And it was, I don't think any of us really understood the gravitas of the situation. I'm not sure I understood it until, a day or two or 3 or 4 ago, maybe. I'm not sure I was understanding of the gravitas of the seriousness of it. I think it's funny too, because when I was driving down there that Friday, okay, I was on the phone with Brad Gilbert, and he was saying, "Yo, this is a big problem. This is a big situation." He was on his way to a charity exhibition for Brian Teacher's daughter, who passed away at the Beverly Hills Tennis Club. Okay,
right.
And he was already saying, and I thought he was being a little extra nervous. And I'm telling you, from the beginning of what he said to the end, he was right on the money. And he might be one of the only people I know that's been in full, official, perfect isolation.
Right.
Yeah, and
well, yeah, because Brad's a bit of a germaphobe, isn't he? I thought that's what I had kind of heard, is that he's very much, doesn't too much fool around with germs.
Well, you said that. I don't know.
Right on. Keep on going, Craig.
No. But that's what I'm just saying that it was. I don't think anyone had a great feel for the seriousness of it. And then by the back end of that week, and the players I stayed there till Thursday, and the players were practicing. It was like a carnival like an amusement park that was abandoned, but a tennis heaven, if you look at my Instagram, Daniil Medvedev was playing a practice match with Karen Khachanov. Donna Vekic was playing a practice match against Mukova, but it was it's like it's hard to. It was hard to understand the seriousness of the situation for someone like me. I don't know if it's because I'm stupid or because I was doing work. I was down there and all these players were there. And for me, I felt like I was doing good. And, it was hard to realize that the world was, kind of shutting down, and not just the tennis world, but the world, So I'm taking it very serious, and everyone else should too. I don't have a lot. I generally speaking don't have a lot of advice for people, but that's my advice.
I think what you said was well said, Craig. I mean, again, take it serious, folks. Hopefully, the listeners out there, once you hear this podcast again, that social distancing, hunkering down, stay indoors, be safe, all of that is very much applicable. So, definitely listen to that. And Craig, on the flip side of that, we've also seen now that they've extended things, they've pushed some things out, they've canceled some things. We saw, recently that the French Open just said, hey, we want this date, so we're about to take it. And they jumped into a particular window. What's been your, I guess, kind of perspective on some of the changes in the schedule that are being announced as far as tournaments either being moved or just saying, hey, we're going to call it until 2021?
Yeah, I think it's also tragic that all the French Open was trying to do was save $1 billion, multi-billion-dollar event.
Right, absolutely.
It's like I guess you could wait for Vasek Pospisil, but they were just trying to save what's the biggest thing there is in France, right? Like it doesn't get that much bigger, man. 3 weeks of packed hotels, 3 weeks of people working, security, ushers, ticket takers, hot dog makers, whatever you want to, So they were just trying to save their event. I think. I heard this morning from someone that's dialed in, a coach of a player, that Wimbledon was gonna maybe try to flex their date into those Olympic weeks, but it doesn't seem here nor there at the moment. Everything just seems way more, dire and more serious than any tennis to be played. But listen, man, if somehow we can flatten that curve and come back up, it wouldn't surprise me personally if all those big mixed tournaments come back up on the board, like boom, 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 boom. Miami, Indian Wells, Madrid. Just try to come up with some way to get those get things back into place, but I'm probably not even the right person to. That's almost I'm just sort of taking pieces of different people's thoughts that I talk with.
Right.
Mm-hmm. But it's not. But like it just feels to me like there's certain tournament owners that have the wherewithal, or that I think would have the wherewithal, to be able to get a tournament up and running lickety split, and that would be Oracle, that would be Larry Ellison at Indian Wells. That would be IMG in Miami, Steve Ross. But hold on a second. Miami,
they're going to have a football stadium.
Right. Well, I'm saying, how are they gonna? What they could do is they could put it back in Key Biscayne.
Right. Yep.
That would be kind of neat. Jan Tiriac, he owns Madrid. I mean, Jan Tiriac's he's the richest guy in Romania. He's a billionaire. He doesn't play. He owns a bank. He owns a bank called Bank Jan Tiriac, man. So
I know.
I swear to God.
That's awesome.
So I think that if God willing and hopefully somehow this thing can get under control, I think that the ones that can will. But the other question becomes, is that it's like, okay, well, Thiago Wilch, right, the Brazilian, he hasn't.
Yeah, right.
Yep.
We saw
so what are they going to do? what are they going to do? They're going to go test. They're going to go test all 150. 150, 250 players, test all the refs, all the workers, everybody. Like, how are you going to do that?
Right.
Yep.
How all the trainers, everyone that walks through the doors. How are you going to test the fans? Like, what are fans no longer going to be able to get interviews?
Right. See, all of that is still undetermined. So it's when we
100%.
even talk about rescheduling tournaments, there's so much unknown out there. I mean,
No doubt.
there are thoughts that there may not be any tennis for the rest of the calendar year
exactly,
because of all those things that you've just mentioned. You don't know how that's going to play out. I know I heard earlier today that Wimbledon they want to try to make the decision on their tournament in the next couple of weeks. And I think that's going to mean a lot. Right.
I think that Wimbledon is trying to stay as nimble as they can because they can, but also they can only play the tournament up until until the weather is undesirable.
That's right.
They only have a few weeks left anyway before it. So I didn't want to come on and be extremely negative about a potential, but if you can do the math on you could do the math on it and see where we're at. I mean, this so-called president says he thinks we're going to be back in business on Easter Sunday. I don't, I think he's the, he's a non-essential worker to me right now. He's non-essential. Right. You shut him right down. The stuff he says is so poor and so incorrect and so pandering and lousy. So I don't believe him, and I believe people like the governor of New York, Andrew Cuomo, and I believe the experts that it's a big, big, serious problem. And the best thing you could do is just stay clear of people, take care of yourself. Right. And listen to all 65 episodes of my podcast.
There you go. And then jump over and listen to all 38 episodes of ours.
Exactly. That's right.
100%.
So let's jump to another topic. So with all the people that you've talked with, as you know, our podcast, although we are interested in all backgrounds and all types of players and ethnicities, we have a particular interest in the African American community. And we know that over the past 25 years, we've seen a big change in terms of the presence of African Americans in the sport of tennis. I mean, obviously, Venus and Serena have done so much on the women's side, but you've had, Chanda Rubin and Zena Garrison and so many others. On the guys, we've had a couple, Malavia Washington,
James Blake.
We got Tiafo now.
I was about to say, and I'm going to claim some of the French guys. I'm going to claim Gael. I'm going to claim Songa. So, I mean, you are definitely seeing more, African-American or people of color out there on the tour.
And I just wondered, from your perspective, someone who has been around the game for so long, how have you seen the change?
And also, Don, I want to just mention, don't sleep on those Swedish brothers, the Emers.
Yep. The Emers, man. Emers, FAA. I mean, we got some young talent coming up. That's crazy.
Yeah, exactly.
It's funny. Are you there?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah. I have this very, very, very searing memory of being in Australia in 1998, and I don't think Serena played, but I have this memory of Venus played that tournament. I mean, she was in cornrows and in Reebok, and she was a kid. And I just remember this all white Australian crowd rooting against her all the way through, and then applauding politely when she won. And I even remember somehow I don't know if Andre had played on the court, if it was it was the center court there, but I was low, and I remember seeing Aura scene, and she said something like, "Man, this crowd doesn't have the right sensibilities." She said something, and it stayed with me for my whole life. I was 23 or 24, and I just can't imagine what passive aggressive and overt, and I just can't imagine the racism that they experienced, basically going from tournament to tournament to tournament, year to year to year. And I think when the book's written, it must have fueled them to beat some ass, because they to be in it for 20 years like that has got to be a lot, and I've never really quite heard either of the sisters speak to it. But shoot, if they came on my show, I'd like to know. No, I would, because that's really the ultimate underdog, isn't it?
Right.
When not just when you walk into a match, but a arena or a tennis club, from the time you're 7 or 8 or 10. So I don't know, man. I think maybe I never even really heard Richard Williams speak to it, and maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he has, but maybe that's why he didn't have them play juniors, because he just thought, hey, I can get them so good myself, and then we could just go. If we're going to do it, let's go make some money, and let's just go see if we can turn. They called it the Williams Tennis Association for a long time, man, because they ran the show. I mean, they really run the show. They do. They do what they want. They get the courts they want. They, for a long time, and I just don't know what to say about. I just don't know what to say about it. I think that, I'd like to think that, I don't even know what to say. I mean, I was in the arena to see Coco Gauff when she played Sophia Kenin for the first time, and maybe Melbourne even changed. Maybe Melbourne's changed in 20 years, but I didn't feel like I felt watching, a black player and the 4 black people in her box on that court. Do you see what I'm saying? I didn't feel the same way. I felt it was different.
Well,
than in 1998. Okay, that's a long time ago now, but.
Well, Craig, that's why I would say to you that that's why we call them pioneers.
Yep.
Right? Because if it wasn't for Venus and Serena, Coco would have probably experienced something like that. I definitely remind you of the whole Indian Wells situation, because I know personally, after that situation happened, I didn't attend Indian Wells for many years after that. And I know Richard, and you talk about, not hearing about them being really outspoken about those type of situations. Well, they were very outspoken about what happened in Indian Wells. Venus was, Serena was, and Richard were. And it was really frustrating to hear that the response to them was like, oh, well, okay, well, just kind of get over it and come back next year, right? I thought there was a lot of insensitivity to what happened, and they were being asked just to kind of deal with it.
Yeah,
but like you said,
hey, by the way, I agree 100%. And guess what? That's how they dealt with it. They didn't show. They didn't play.
Exactly. They knew they had the clout at that time because remember, Indian Wells was a mandatory tournament, and the WTA made an exception for them and said, well, if they didn't play, they at least had to do some sort of promotion for the tour. So Venus and Serena for many years just used that as an opportunity to be in LA, back home, and they did a few things there, but when they came back and said, we are not playing because we fear for our safety. And remember, this is already after Monica Seles had her thing happen. So I don't think the WTA was going to press them on that, especially when they brought the safety piece back up. So,
like I said, I can't imagine what it must have been like. I just interviewed Charlie Passerelle, who was a close friend of Arthur Ashe, and I tried to kind of take him into that deep water, but sometimes when you're doing the interviews, it's not always the easiest thing to go into the complete darkness. So I asked him if he had been around Arthur when he experienced overt racism and such, and he was like, yes, I did. And he said often that Arthur didn't ever say anything, and that he wished he had. And Arthur handled a lot of adversity with a certain class that I guess really defined him. I would recommend that interview I think Charlie talked about Arthur a lot. Those guys were friends from the time they were juniors. They went to UCLA together, and they were really very close best friends for a very long time. And that's kind of an interesting interview. I talked to James Blake. He seems to have somehow floated through until, of course, he was, muckled to the ground based on mistaken identity by an undercover cop who thought he was like like a money launderer or some kind of a international felon. And he was wearing his Final Eight Club U.S. Open badge, his credential, and the guy just cuffed him and stuffed him, and James, to his credit, said, "Listen, man, I'm not gonna sue you, but you gotta fire this officer, and you gotta." I forgot exactly what he said, but I try to address those things. I think there's probably some room for improvement on my part, but I try to get down those roads. I think that, there's Donald Young, and there's Sloan, and there's, there was Alexandra Stevenson. Listen, Taylor Townsend, I'm dying to get her on my show. She's just she's a funky chick. She's a great player. I've tried to kind of bark her down on social media to see if she, say, hey, listen, I got a cool show. Let's get on the microphone or have a listen and tell me what you think. But I haven't really been able to make that happen yet. She's coached long time by Donald Young's father.
Right.
And Donald Young is nowhere, man. I mean, he seems like he's just finished. I don't know what happened to him.
I think, Craig, we're going to have a competition to see who can get Taylor Townsend on their show first. Because we actually saw Taylor at the Oracle Challenger in Newport We were
Yeah.
at her matches at the U.S.
Yeah.
Open. We've been strong supporters of her. We took a picture with
Yeah.
her a couple months ago. So we're with you. We love Taylor Townsend. We feel that she is immensely talented. I mean, just great hands. She has a great game. It's just a matter of when all of that's going to come together. But yeah, we're going to have a little competition to see which of us can finally get Taylor Townsend on
No,
the
man. Listen,
show.
I defer to you, and then you want give her my number. Listen, but I tried to. She had such a great run at the U.S. Open.
Yeah.
And you guys may or may not know this, but Sergio Tacchini sponsors my show.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually was trying to get Tacchini because she was making that run. She beat Simona Halep.
Yeah, right. we were there.
She was Money in the Bank, and I was like, "Yo, put the Tacchini on this girl."
That's right.
And trailblaze it because she has a different body type. She's the real deal player. She's cute. She's got a good style, and she could do something. She could move the needle on the brand, and they just weren't organized for that at the time. But I'm a big fan. I'd like to see her. If we get the tennis back, I'd love to see her play the kind of singles she played at the U.S. Open a little bit.
Oh, yeah.
Well,
4 or 5 matches, I think, right? So, listen, if you're winning 4 matches, you're basically winning tournaments. And, I think she has a good personality, and I love the way she volleys. Her volleys are just stone cold, man. She's just such a good volleyer.
Yeah, this is something that Bryce and I continuously talk about on our podcast is Taylor's game. And honestly, we know that she ain't got the coins, but my God, if she could get with like a Martina Navratilova and just, oh my goodness, to me, that pairing would be, for me and Bryce, that would just be glorious. Because to me,
you mean
I think that...
Martina?
I'm sorry?
You mean to have Martina coach her?
Absolutely. To bring that level of because again, Martina had that net game. She could teach her how to transition and, like I said, not trying to clown, but Martina was the trailblazer as it relates to, kind of converting herself and being the athlete that you need to be in order to deliver a strong serve and volley game. I believe she can bring so many great things to Taylor. Like I said, no, she doesn't have the coins, but my goodness, that would be just a glorious partnership if it could happen.
I would I need to think about I need to think about that.
I like that. Okay.
I'm not ready to jump on that.
Who would you pair her with? If she's not with Donald Young?
I need to think about it.
All right.
Because I think something we all agree on is that the current coach is probably not helping her leverage all of her abilities.
That's Donald Young's father.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know enough about him either. It's a great accomplishment to have players, get into the top 100, win tournaments, make a living playing. But, I'll tell you what, man, seeing Donald with his mother when he was 32, the mother sitting on the side of the court with like a sleeping bag over her legs, and it's just didn't seem like a good look to me. Like if I'm the opponent, I'm not losing to nobody with his mother sitting on the side of the court. You know what I'm saying? I'm trying to go try to beat this guy's ass. Go
Craig
talk
got
to your
that
mom
step on the neck.
Right?
Go talk to your mommy after the set, after I whip you. You know what I mean? That was like a little weird for me. So I don't know.
Greg,
Greg, I wasn't. I didn't really like that look. But and then Sloane got way off track. Coco Gauff is the real thing.
Yes.
I think though that she's. I mean, I think that she's so good, but a lot can happen from 15 to 19. So, I did feel like, she's almost in like at the tournament when she played Kenin, she made a run. She beat Osaka. Osaka kind of choked.
Yep.
And Osaka got like super anxious and tight. If you remember, Osaka whipped her at the U.S. Open in that big match, and then Naomi made that class move where she had Coco address the crowd. But when she came back 6 months later, she felt terrible pressure, and she just she really lost that match to Coco. But I just feel like player box management and player entourages can make a big difference in the outcome of matches. And I talked about it with Lindsay Davenport, and I talked about it. I've been asking people, we do a thing in the show called the 10-ball scramble, where it's a word association, and I've been asking them, say, big entourage or lean and mean. Yep. And I think that, when you got like 16 knuckleheads in the box jumping up and down every point, it's too much. Too much fist pumping, too much. Like, there's just a few times in a match where you can pull your player through. And I think that they're still figuring it all out. She's become a big star very quick.
Right.
And we'll see. But I mean, hey, listen, she already won a pro tournament, man. She lost in qualifying. She got the lucky loser spot. She won the tournament. There's a lot of players. Yeah, in Linz, Austria. There's a lot of players that have never won a tournament, man, that are great players.
Oh, yeah.
So, I mean, she already won a tournament.
Right.
It's unbelievable. Yeah, she seems like really smart and kind of quirky, and she's got a nice personality. Naomi Osaka, same thing. She seems like she's smart and she has a nice personality, and she's kind of finding her personality. And I think that's cool to see.
That is.
Yeah. Sorry.
I wanted to go back to Venus and Serena for just a quick second.
Sure.
When we were talking to you, I think last week or earlier this week, you were mentioning something about you knew a little bit of information about the King Richard film on Richard Williams that was being produced.
I do. I know some things that I can share with you and your listeners. First of all, the guy who wrote the movie, his name is Zach Balin, and he is the husband of a young woman who I worked with, and I think I may have even hired at VH1 a long, long time ago, a girl named Kate Sussman. Anyway, Zach Balin wrote this script, and the script got on like a list here in Hollywood that it got attention and ended up becoming like one of the biggest sales of the year last year. It was like a 7-figure sale for the script.
Wow.
Producer of the script is a guy named, his name is Tim White. And I believe he played tennis at like Williams or Smith College or something. I haven't seen him play, but I heard he's a really good player. I know he's a really good player, actually. And those are good signs, man, because when the producer is a good player, you'd like to think that usually sports movies, like the action looks terrible, right? It's all corny and it never looks good. It looks bad. And I think that that's good. I know that, when they got Will Smith to play Richard, that was a big deal, obviously.
Right.
The whole situation is being looked at as like an award film. Okay. So the DP, the director of photography, is one of the baddest there is, a cat named Robert Elswit. And he, man, I believe he's an Oscar winner. He's bad to the bone. He's one of the most official there is. I know that, their production is down, right? So I can tell you all that. And you have to think that that the show must go on at some point. So hopefully, that production can get back up and running. But I know that that's like a real deal award season film. So I guess we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I tell you what, I remember when they announced that Will Smith was going to play Richard, and it's funny because, yes, he brings a huge star power to the movie, right? But something that is, often kind of like in the African American culture, something that we deal with is there's this concern with shade and color, and if, as we all know, Richard Williams is a very dark-skinned African American, and Will Smith is not. Right. Now, of course, in Hollywood, you can do whatever with makeup or whatever, but I do know that there were some voices out of the Black community that was kind of like, here we have this very successful dark African American male who is going to be potentially portrayed by this much lighter skinned African American male. And there's always been kind of this concern about, light skinned Blacks or light skinned African Americans are more acceptable in Hollywood and that kind of thing. So I hope that doesn't end up being an issue, because Will Smith is a great actor, and I think he'll bring a lot to the role. But I definitely remember hearing that when that announcement was first made.
Well, I'm going to be honest with you, Bryce, and with you, Craig. When I heard that Will was playing it, that's exactly what went through my head as well. Because, again, I think back to things like, you look at X-Men and you see how Storm was Halle Berry. I just feel like that's like a Grace Jones. Casting. I mean, it's like you have your idea in your head of the complexion and person that you would see in that particular role. I would think like a Richard Williams would be like a Idris Elba.
Right.
Elba, yeah,
exactly, that's right.
Because again, a darker, African American man, you would just immediately would be like, okay, yeah, that fits. But again, with Hollywood,
let me just
go ahead, Craig.
Tell you, one of my passwords that I use is Stringer Bell, so I'm a big Idris Elba fan, man. I love it.
There you go. Oh yeah.
So one of my passwords is Stringer Bell. I understand. I shouldn't say understand. I've heard that stuff. I've heard those sentiments, and that's definitely out of my pay grade or my shade grade, or however you want to say it. But what I would say is that so often tennis movies stink, and there's only in the last couple of years has there ever been for the longest time there was never a good tennis movie.
Right.
And then the Borg McEnroe movie I think is quite good. Mm-hmm. And the Billie Jean King movie, I thought was quite good. Yeah. But generally speaking, there had never even been another good tennis movie. So, listen, I don't bet against Will Smith. I don't bet against Zach Balin. I don't get. I mean, the guy. I think that I don't bet against Robert Elswit. I think that if if this movie gets made, now that or when this movie gets made, I think it's probably got a chance to be quite good. And I know Venus and Serena and the family signed off on it as well, and that must mean the script must be pretty damn good too.
Right.
So
we are definitely here for it.
Yeah, exactly. But I think the one thing I do want to say about Venus and Serena is, if this season gets shut down, do we even see them again? Or it's just like, it seemed like Venus was on her way to shutting it down.
Right.
And Serena, it's felt to me for a long time that she's just trying to take one last shot at it, and maybe if she won a slam and she decides she was like still playing really well, she would continue for like a farewell lap. But I just wonder if there's these players that are in their late 30s. Venus is obviously quite old. I think that that's going to be one of the, maybe like sort of, listen, it's all sad, right? Yeah. Like there's the situation is more sad than players' end of their careers. But yeah, I think that's going to be a sad thing if, they can't take a proper bow.
Right.
So
it's definitely a consideration. And I think the one thing to kind of take an alternate look at that, we know how much the Olympics mean to the Williams sisters, right? And Isaac and I had discussed several times that we didn't think, Venus was going to make the Olympic squad for this year. Mm-hmm. But with this, maybe additional time, if she comes back and plays really well, she could potentially get her ranking up enough to make the team for doubles. So that could be a perspective that they have. I know Serena really wants to try to get to 25.
Correct.
And but I know she's going to stay through at least through the Olympics. So where I'm in the same boat as you, I was thinking Venus was probably, if the Olympics happened this year, 2020 was probably going to be her last year, but I think this may extend her for a year.
Mm-hmm. Just might.
So, Craig, we want to really thank you for that. This has been an amazing. We have just been sitting here talking and laughing and having a great time, and it's been just a pleasure. And I know our audience, this has been a real treat for them. Any final words that you'd like to share about either your life or your experience or the tennis community or podcasting or?
No, listen, man, I want to tell everybody that first and foremost, you can find my show at underreviewtennis.com. And if you type in Under Review Tennis Podcast, you can access it anywhere you get a podcast. But it's key that you write in tennis. There's other knuckleheads that have under review. So you got to write an under review tennis, and then it comes up. And then, as I just told you, we rock with Takini, and it may not, if anybody needs any retail therapy, I've got a code that I'll share with you. If you go to sergiotakini.com and you type in all capitals, _review and the number 30, you get 30% off anything you buy. And they just,
oh wow, very nice.
And their stuff is fly, and you could buy the McEnroe jacket, so you could buy some new stuff. You could buy some hats. You could buy the wristbands, and that's it, man. There's my shows. You mentioned in the beginning that I mentioned to you guys that they're evergreen. Basically, we don't sit down on a current event so long that a listener would be like, oh, that's so old, I don't want to listen to this. we do these deep dives. I do a 5-set format where we talk about, we call it the off the court report. We see what they're up to kind of off the court, on the court. We try to talk about sort of the current event or what's going on the court. And then the third set of our show, we talk about the player's career or the guest career. The fourth set, we do what I call the 10-ball scramble. It's word association, okay? And then the last set of our show, we call it the king or the queen of the court. If they could make a change in the sport, what would it be? And we get a lot of different answers, and people seem to like the format. We keep it moving. But that's it, man. Listen to my show, buy yourself some tahini, and, and let's talk again anytime, man. I enjoyed myself.
Absolutely. And listeners, if you haven't listened to this podcast, please go out there and take a listen. The episodes are really good. And Craig, as soon as we get from underneath this kind of stay-at-home thing, Isaac and I would love to come up and meet you for lunch or dinner one day and just continue the conversation.
Now we're talking, man. Finally. I mean,
exactly.
You got a deal.
Yes,
All right.
Well,
guys, thank you.
Thank you so much, Craig. And to our listeners, we will continue to just try to bring you some new and exciting content while the professional tennis tour is on hiatus. We have a couple of things in the works right now, so we hope to get some of those things out to you very soon. So hopefully you have enjoyed this episode with Mr. Craig Shapiro. We're going to take this opportunity to sign off. This is your boy, Bryce.
And this is your boy, Isaac.
And we are Brothers on Tennis. Have a great week, everyone.